Welcome to Russian Submarines Sierra I SSN. I'm your Captain Jive Turkey. This is also known as Project 945, as it was labeled by the Russians, and they gave the project name Barracuda. Now, the Barracuda was born from Project 705, NATO name Alpha, and the Alpha program was very revolutionary in a number of ways. The first was the hull was made 100% out of titanium, so it was very strong and very light. Secondly, the amount of automation in the Alpha was revolutionary. It was amazing. Everything from the reactor to the torpedo reload to the galley could all be controlled from one control room. Thus, they had a very small crew of about 20 to 30 officers that would take it to sea, and they could operate the entire submarine from one central location. This was completely different than anything before. Well, they took this idea of high speed, high automation, and brought it into a new class of submarine, NATO named Sierra, where they would add some time on station to it, because the Alpha's limitation was it could only stay on station for a couple of weeks at the most because of the small crew and the demands and rigors of being at sea. Well, if they had a slightly larger crew, slightly larger submarine like the Sierra, but with the same automation and the same titanium pressure hull, maybe they could have the benefits of both worlds of having a longer at-sea duration, on time on station, and higher speeds and higher automation. The first is the K-239 Carp, laid down July 1978 and launched in 1983, the same month. She was finally commissioned about a year later in 1984. Here you can see a nice little drawing I got from Covert Shores. I want to give them credit here. Check out hisutton.com. He has a fantastic website on all things submarine. Notice up on the bow there, up on the front, you can see that they still have mounts for a cylindrical array. And that's what they went to sea with here. Also, if you look at the mid section around where 30 is, you can see the prime mover is a single drive, single steam engine powered by the reactor that we'll get into in just a second. It's a single shaft submarine with a pod on the back. The pod labeled 35 is the sonar towed array. And you can see the sail there, where number 12 is a escape pod. Now, the escape pods were added a little bit later on. They weren't originally installed, but later on in Sierra's 2 and further generations, they had 2 escape pods in the sail instead of just 1. All right, titanium hull, like we said, it is 107 meters long, very expensive submarine to build because the pressure hull is made out of titanium. This is a dual-hulled submarine, so it's got 2 hulls. It is 12 meters wide, so it's just as wide as a 688, but it is a little bit shorter than a 688. And the estimated crush depth is around 1,800 feet. If you look at unclassified sources, that number varies a little bit, but very, very deep diving submarine. It's powered by a single 190 megawatt OK650. I like how they name the reactors. OK, everything's fine. 650 nuclear reactor, producing approximately 50,000 horsepower to a single 6-bladed screw. And a 6-bladed screw was very unique, very rare, but the Sierras had them, and the screw blade itself, you see in this picture, pure titanium. How they milled this, I don't know, but they've got themselves a pure titanium screw for the 2 Sierra 1s that they built. The powertrain is fully rafted, which means the entire powertrain, that's the shaft and the main engines and all that, including the reactor and reactor coolant pumps, are suspended by rafters from the ceiling in the engine room. This is very much like Western submarines are built today. So it was very advanced for the time that this was being built in the early 80s. And what the advantage of that is by hanging the entire powertrain from a rafter is you can sound isolate the mounts of the rafter, effectively sound isolating the entire powertrain, making it a very quiet submarine. Max speed was about 33 knots. Some unclassified sources say 34 knots. Sonar was the SCAT suite, something I'm quite familiar with, shark gill, low frequency active, which was very good for the time. For 1980s Soviet technology, in the 1980s, the shark gill sonar was the best that they had, and it was very good for the time. And like I said, it had a towed array. It also had some non-acoustic sensors. These are things like, isotope detection, and then later on they installed wake detection, because the Russians were always big about not just depending on sonar to detect targets. They wanted to use every means possible, including wake detection and a radioactive trail led by another nuclear submarine. So they fooled around with these a lot and had these installed on the Sierra ones as well. The torpedo tube configuration was 4/4, you can see there. It's got 4 65 centimeters over 4 53 centimeter torpedoes. The 65 centimeters would shoot the large, 65 centimeter wake-homing carrier killers, they called them. That was the very large warhead and a very large torpedo. The 53 centimeter were primarily anti-submarine torpedoes. And you see here in the picture, they've painted on some teeth onto the Barracuda. They had this painted on at least one of the hulls. All right, looking closely at this hull in dry dock, you can see the retractable bow planes here. And look closely at the free flood area up there at the top where I've drawn the red arrow. That is a little door where after the submarine submerges, the door will rise up and cut off any more laminate flow going into the area between the two hulls. The people pressure hull is underneath this outer hull here, and that area between the two hulls is a free flood area. So what they did in previous versions, like the Alpha, for instance, this free flood area would stay open even when submerged. Well, the Sierra added these little doors to the bottom that could shut after they submerged, causing a more smooth flow of water over the hull as it went through the ocean. And you can see the retractable bow planes as well has its own door cover there. Very complicated mechanics that go into deploying these bow planes. And kudos to the Soviet Union for getting it figured out. All right, she operated out of Guba-Ara in Russia. That's very near Murmansk. Also, you may see online, I've heard this called Ara-Guba. So it's a translation thing as to which one you want to put first. For short, it's mostly called Ara. And she deployed frequently. This is the Sierra I to the Barents Sea. She did make some forays out into the Atlantic, but primarily was a Barents Sea platform. It was almost as if they were using the Sierra I to continue testing their ideas of automation and whatnot. But primarily the area you see above Norway and Russia there, that was her playground. That's where we tracked her the most. All right. The second hull in the Sierra I family was the K-276 Kostroma. Laid down in 1984, launched 2 years later, and commissioned finally in 1987. See, on the 11th of February 1992 at about 8 p.m., she was involved in a collision. This is the highlight of her career to this point. She was involved with a collision as she was attempting to come to the surface in the Barents Sea off the coast of Kilden Island. What she didn't realize is that right in front of her, and unbeknownst to her, was an American 688 submarine classified Baton Rouge, SSN 689. She was in the Baton Rouge's baffles, which is why the Baton Rouge did not see her. And as she came up at approximately 5 knots, preparing to surface, the forward part of her sail hit the rear end of the port side of the main ballast tanks of the Baton Rouge, causing damage to both submarines. Here you can see a very good picture of the Kostroma's sail after the collision. The Kostroma was repaired on the 3rd of June, 1992, and renamed Crab on the 6th of April, 1993, after repairs were complete. So it took, almost a year to get the sail back up to speed. In 1996, its original name, Kostroma B276, was restored. I want you to notice how they've changed the name from K276 to B276. The point at which that changes is when they transition from Soviet Union to Russian Federation. So Russian Federation was around in 1992, 1993, so they started referring to the Kostroma as Bravo or B276. And that's when that happens. The Baton Rouge was scrapped in 1993 instead of being repaired, and consequently, the Kostroma was awarded a kill when the USS Baton Rouge was decommissioned due to the damage. And the crew of the Kostroma would paint a red number 1 over a Russian red star. It was a white number 1 over a Russian red star. See, today, Bravo 239 Carp was sent to Fleet Reserve in 1996 pending nuclear refueling. There was a plan to refuel her in 2013 and reactivate her, but that plan was scrapped a couple years ago due to cost. It's just too expensive right now to bring her back, but she's still in the water, still serviceable, but she needs a lot of work, including a new reactor. The Kostroma Bravo 276, on the other hand, is technically still attached to the Northern Fleet, but it as well is awaiting overhaul and refuel, but it is not in mothball like the Carp is. It is still an active platform. It just hasn't been to sea in years, and honestly, we're not expecting to see it go to sea again. But until they make a decision on what to do with it, it is still technically an active unit. All right, thank you for watching, everybody. This has been the Sierra I SSN video. I'm Captain Jive Turkey. If you would like to see more of these, please hit the like button down below, leave a comment, and maybe even hit that join button. I would appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next time. And remember, Patreons get to see these slides first over on my Patreon channel.